Good morning, everybody. What's going on? It's Big Dave, and it is time for this edition of 100 Hug Stories for the last 100 days of 2023. Just a mini podcast of positive experiences from my travels of hugging 500,000 people around the world. And for today's story, we're going back to 2008 to Galveston, Texas. And like many of my stories, even though the hug and the story starts, is in one place, the start of it was pretty much the year before when I wrote an article for ESPN that ended up getting a couple million hits. And, it put me on the radar of so many people who just loved my story of just traveling around the world, trying to do what I can to create smiles. And there was this one woman in Galveston, Zion Walker, who once she heard that I was going to bike across the United States again and I was looking to bike and volunteer some places, she contacted me and she told me I had to bike through Galveston. And she said, the community needs you and they're going to love you. And she said, once these kids meet a brother who has bicycled across continents, it's going to be something. And she assured me, she said, Dave, you are going to change lives. And so her pitch was very emphatic and impassioned, and it was hard to turn down. So when I was plotting my route across the United States, I made Galveston one of my stops. And, Zion told me, she said, hey, listen, don't worry about anything. I'll meet you in Houston and I'll take care of everything. And sure enough, she did. I was met in Houston with some people from a local cycling team, and one of the guys was named Ron Contreras. And Ron and I went out to dinner that night and just talked about my travels and my experiences around the world. And he just loved my story, and he accompanied me when I bicycled from Houston to Galveston. And he arranged for me to have some support that day, which was great because it was 94 degrees and 94% humidity. And it was just draining. I could not guzzle Gatorade fast enough to replenish what I was losing. I mean, it was a rough day. But once we got to the causeway, we pulled over and we waited in a lot. And I was like, what are we waiting for? Let's just go. And he was like, no, we got to wait for the police escort. And I was like, okay, 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes goes by, and I am starting to cramp up. It's when you are cycling like that in that heat and stuff, at the end of the day, you just want to end the day. And I just didn't want to wait around. So I said, fuck it, let's just ride. And all of a sudden, Ron, who was up until this point, very, very nice, very, very nice, just sort of snapped at me. And he said, no, we're going to do this right. This is not about you right now. This is not about you. And I was like, God damn. And he came on so strong that it really sort of like, okay, brother, whatever you say. And then we waited about another 20 minutes or so. And then all of a sudden, in that next 20 minutes, members of local bike, road and mountain bike clubs, individual cyclists, police cruisers, bike police, a few joggers, some cars, all of a sudden, everybody gathered at this spot. And it was time to go. There was a city councilman that showed up on his bicycle. And everybody was just excited about bicycling the causeway because they were using my story of biking across the United States as leverage to get them to put a permanent bike lane on there. And so, once there was this build and this mass of people, Ron said, okay, man, it's time. Lead us the way, big man. And so I started pedaling up the causeway into this fierce headwind. And, my body was kind of groaning because I was just starting to cramp and I was just stiff. But I was getting energy from the passing motorists that were honking their horns and hanging out of the cars, and just, the news crews are filming me as I was biking across. And it was it was something. But what really, really, really made it special was Ron's voice. Ron had started off cycling with me, but ended up catching a bad hamstring cramp and had to ride across the causeway in the back of a police car. But hanging out of the police car with a massive smile on his face, Ron just kept screaming, "One man can change the world. One man can change the world. One man can change the world," over and over and over again. And, you know, I say this about a lot of stories. I love this story. I love all these stories. I love all these stories because I lived it. I loved all these stories because they're genuine. They're very, very human. They're very, very, there's so much in all of these moments. In every one of the stories that I've shared, there's so much compassion, so much empathy, so much energy, just so much verve, just so much. And so when I look at these pictures and tell some of these stories, some people have asked me, am I really getting choked up at some points of these stories? And I'm like, yeah, because I lived it. I lived it, and it was beautiful. And if there's anything that you're going to take away from this story or any of my 100 hug and high five stories that I'm sharing in this little podcast, in this little exercise, it is that one man can change the world. One man can change the world. One man can change the world. Everybody, I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day. Be well. Come on, man. Come on, man. We gotta get it. We gotta get a hug, man.